The rotor blades were already spinning. Wind whipped across the rooftop. Champagne glasses rattled on silver trays. And at the center of the chaos, Clara Bennett stood silent, hands clasped, head slightly bowed, as if she'd done something wrong. Across from her, Victor Langford, a smug billionaire with ice-blue eyes, smirked as he pushed his teenage son forward. "Go on, Clara," he mocked. "Fly the Heli. Impress us. If you do, maybe I'll make him my heir." Guest snickered. Phones recorded. His son looked ashamed. Clara lifted her head, slowly. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't afraid. And when she finally spoke, even the pilot froze. A truth was coming. A truth no one was ready for. Keep watching. The story gets deeper and darker than anyone expected. Clara Bennett wasn't supposed to be on that rooftop. At least, that's what everyone believed. To the wealthy elite circling Victor Langford, the real estate tycoon who loved attention more than oxygen. Clara was just the help, a quiet black woman who handled documents, schedules, and the thankless tasks no one else bothered with. But they didn't know her. Not really. Clara had once been a rising star in aviation engineering, top of her class, a pilot in training, a woman who understood helicopters down to the last rivet. But life had broken sharp pieces in her path. Her mother's illness, her brother's death, the crushing debt that followed. She'd taken whatever job she could, even if it meant working for a man who treated her like furniture. Victor Langford, meanwhile, strutted through the world like he owned every breath in it. His son, Edmund, was different. Quiet, observant, uncomfortable with his father's arrogance. He watched the way Clara moved through rooms. He noticed her grace, her intelligence, her discipline. But Victor didn't see it. He never saw it. To him, people came in two categories, those above him and those below. Tonight's event, a glamorous rooftop celebration, overlooking the European skyline, was Victor's playground. Politicians, investors, socialites. Everyone there had more money than empathy. Clara moved silently among them, ignored, underestimated, until Victor spotted her near the helicopter. "She's been staring at the heli like she wants to drive it," he sneered loudly, making sure the crowd heard. "Tell you what, let's have some fun." A few guests chuckled, ready for entertainment. Clara didn't flinch, because behind her calm eyes lived something no one in that glittering crowd suspected. She knew this aircraft better than the man who leased it. She knew its owner even better, because she was the owner. A truth Victor Langford was about to learn the hard way. The billionaire's laugh echoed through the hangar, sharp and careless, bouncing off steel walls like mockery carved into metal. Mechanics paused. Workers exchanged glances. Everyone expected the same thing, that the black woman standing there would shrink, step back, apologize for wasting his time. But she didn't move. She walked toward the helicopter, steady, slow, calm. Every step tightened the billionaire's smirk. "Careful," he said, "these controls aren't toys." She didn't answer. She examined the tail rotor, checked the skids, ran her fingers across the fuselage like someone who knew every bolt, every screw, every story hidden in the machine. The billionaire frowned. "Wait, you've flown before?" She looked at him, just one glance, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt. Behind her, the teenage boy he mocked earlier watched with wide, terrified eyes. He wanted her to stop. He didn't want the billionaire to humiliate her, but she wasn't afraid. She climbed into the cockpit. Silence dropped over the hangar. A mechanic whispered, "Sir, she knows what she's doing." The billionaire's smile began to stiffen. The engine roared to life, smooth, controlled, perfect. Not like a beginner, not like someone taking a risk. Like an expert returning home. Dust spiraled. Papers flew. Hair whipped in the rotor wash. And for the first time, the billionaire realized something was very, very wrong with his assumptions. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't trying to impress him. She belonged there. She had always belonged there. And the boy. He finally saw a future he never thought he could claim. A future she was about to fight for. The helicopter lifted off the ground in a slow, graceful rise, as if the machine itself recognized the hands that commanded it. The hangar's metal doors shook from the wind. The billionaire stepped back, squinting through the swirling dust, his confidence peeling away one layer at a time. He expected chaos. He expected panic. He expected her to crash the moment the skids left the floor. But instead, she flew, smooth, steady, perfect, inside the cockpit. Her hands moved across the controls with the muscle, memory of someone who had spent a lifetime in the sky. She didn't have to think. She didn't hesitate. Everything she touched responded instantly, like an orchestra obeying its conductor. Below, the teenage boy watched, his heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. He had always known his mother was strong. He just never knew she carried this kind of power. Quiet, disciplined, earned through years of work nobody ever saw. The billionaire paced, muttering under his breath. No, this isn't possible. She said she worked here only 6 months. This kind of flying, this level, it takes years, decades. A mechanic swallowed hard and spoke carefully. Sir, it does take decades. That's why pilots do advanced testing. That's why only certified aviation experts can handle— Stop, the billionaire snapped. But his voice shook. The helicopter hovered 50 feet above the ground. So still, so perfect that even the mechanic stood frozen. Not a wobble. Not a correction. Not a struggle. She made it look effortless. Then she did something that silenced the entire hangar. She turned the helicopter sideways. A maneuver pilot's. Trained years to master, and held it there. The blades sliced the air at an angle so precise that even the most respected professionals would hesitate. And she smiled. She wasn't showing off. She wasn't performing. She was remembering. For the first time in years, the billionaire couldn't take it anymore. He waved his arms wildly. Bring it down, he yelled, frustration cracking in his voice. Bring it down right now. She heard him through the headset the mechanic handed her before takeoff. Her voice came through calm, smooth, unbothered. Isn't this what you asked for? She paused. To fly the helicopter. And make your air? The billionaire stiffened. He remembered every word he had said. Mocking, careless, arrogant. If you can fly the Heli, he had laughed, I'll make your boy my heir. He laughed then. He wasn't laughing now. She lowered the helicopter slowly. The landing was so gentle the skids barely tapped the ground. The engine spun down, the blades slowing with a whisper. She stepped out, her hair pushed back by the wind, her face calm as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But her presence filled the hangar like a storm. The billionaire swallowed as she walked toward him. All the smugness, all the pride, all the assumptions had drained from his body. He saw something now he never cared to see before. A woman who didn't just fly a helicopter. A woman who had mastered worlds he knew nothing about. I want to know who you really are, he demanded, but his voice was small. She didn't raise her chin. She didn't try to intimidate him. She simply spoke with truth, sharp, clean, undeniable. I'm the woman who owned this aviation company before you bought it, she said quietly. The hangar erupted. Mechanics gasped. The boy's eyes widened. Even the billionaire staggered back like her words were a physical blow. She continued, My husband built this company. Every aircraft here, every mechanic trained here, every blueprint archived here, I helped design, test, and fly. The billionaire blinked, stunned. That's impossible. The documents were buried, she finished. Because the world never believes a black woman can own something this big, this technical, this powerful. Silence. She stepped closer, her voice steady. I didn't stop flying because I lost my skills. I stopped because I lost my husband and my place in his company. You bought this business thinking you were saving it. But the truth is, she looked around the hangar. You bought something that was never yours. The billionaire's throat tightened. He looked at the boy. And the promise? She asked. Her eyes locked on his. You said my son would be your heir. The entire hangar froze. The billionaire's face went pale. Not because he didn't want to fulfill the promise, but because he finally understood. He wasn't giving her son an opportunity. He was giving him back a legacy that had always belonged to him. The woman stood tall. the dust settling behind her like a curtain closing on an old world. "This company is ours," she said. "Always was." The billionaire lowered his head. For the first time in his life, he felt small. The hangar felt different now. Quieter, heavier, as if the air itself refused to move until justice was complete. Mechanics whispered in the corners, their eyes flicking between the woman, the boy, and the billionaire whose world had just collapsed at his feet. No one dared speak above a whisper. No one dared interrupt what was unfolding. The billionaire, Gregory Shaw, once untouchable, unshakable, stood there trembling. His jaw clenched and unclenched as if he were fighting a war inside himself. He had spent a lifetime believing he could buy anything. Companies, loyalty, power, people, but he had never stood in front of someone he couldn't outprice. Slowly, the woman, Elena Ward, stepped toward her son. He looked up at her with a mix of pride, awe, and a kind of relief that made his shoulders drop. She touched his cheek gently, her hand steady despite the storm she had just walked through. "You okay?" she whispered. He nodded, though his voice cracked. "I didn't know, Mom. I didn't know you weren't supposed to know yet," she said softly. Her smile was fragile, but her eyes were steel. "I was waiting for the right moment." Behind them, Gregory exhaled shakily and took one careful step forward. "Elena," he said. She didn't turn. "Elena," he repeated louder this time. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who you were." "Exactly," she said quietly. "That's the problem." She finally faced him. "You never asked who I was. You assumed." Her words struck him harder than any accusation. Because they were true. He looked at the boy, Oliver, the kid who had carried the weight of his mother's humiliation on his shoulders, the kid he mocked without a second thought, the kid he promised an inheritance he never intended to honor. Gregory swallowed. "Elena, what do you want from me?" The room stilled. Everyone leaned in, not physically but emotionally, waiting to hear her answer. Because this was the moment. This was the point where the story could turn toward grace, or burn into vengeance. Elena didn't shout. She didn't demand. She didn't threaten. She simply said the truth. "I want my husband's legacy returned to our family." Gregory blinked. "That company, it's legally—" "No," she cut in. "It's legally yours, but morally." She shook her head. "It was built by a black engineer who spent 20 years proving he was worth listening to. And when he died, vultures circled before he was even buried." Her voice cracked for the first time, just once, but it was enough to silence every soul in the building. Elena breathed in deeply. "You didn't steal it, Gregory, but the men who sold it to you did. They buried the ownership documents. They rewrote our history, and you never questioned why a company built by a Ward didn't have a single." Ward left on the paperwork. Gregory staggered back as if she had struck him. He didn't defend himself. He didn't argue. He simply stood there, absorbing every truth as it carved itself into him. "Tell me what to do," he whispered. Elena's eyes softened, not with forgiveness but clarity. "You honor the promise you laughed at." Gregory looked at Oliver, who stood straighter now, his eyes shining with a pride he had never felt in his life. "You make him the heir," she continued. "Not out of pity, not out of pressure, but because he is the rightful heir." A silence stretched, long, heavy, and trembling. Gregory nodded slowly. "Then he will be," he said. "I'll sign whatever you need. I'll put the Ward name back where it belongs." His voice cracked. "And I'll fix what I can." Elena studied him. Not his clothes, not his wealth, not his reputation. She studied the man, the flawed human being, standing in front of her. And finally, she nodded. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, just acknowledgement that justice, at last, was no longer running. The mechanics stepped forward, one by one, surrounding Elena and Oliver in a quiet semicircle, not because they were ordered to, not because they wanted to witness drama, but because they understood what had just happened. A legacy stolen had been returned. A truth buried had been unearthed. A lie powerful men believed had shattered. Gregory stepped back, giving Elena space, his pride stripped bare. Oliver turned to his mother. Does this mean the company is ours again? Elena looked at him with a softness that melted the entire room. No, baby, she whispered. It means the world finally remembers who built it. He threw his arms around her, tears falling into her shoulder. She held him tight, her eyes closed, breathing in the victory she had waited years to taste. Above them, the helicopter blades came to a final stop. The wind settled. The dust drifted down like snow. A chapter ending. A legacy reborn. A mother and son standing where they always belonged, under a sky they no longer needed permission to touch.